Moreno defeats Steve Erceg by unanimous decision 49-46 across the scorecards. There was 1 point in the fight in the 4th round. There was about 7 seconds left. John Anik said, "It stands to reason that Moreno on any card could be up 4-0. Stands to reason? He's saying it's reasonable that Moreno could have been up 4-0 against Erceg after the 4th round? And DC agreed with it. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about, bro? That's not reasonable. No, that's if they gave him 4-0 after the 4th round, that's not reasonable. No, Steve Erceg won a round before that. Like, Moreno looked great. He was definitely winning the fight. It was competitive, but let's give Steve Erceg some credit here, you know? And that's what it was. A very high-level flyweight fight. The flyweight division is absolutely amazing to watch. I mean, some insanely good fighters in that division. But man, they gotta give Steve Erceg a step down in competition. He has literally been fighting the best fighters in the world in his last 3 fights. He lost all 3 of them. He fought Alexander Pantoja, a very close fight. Then he got knocked out in the 1st round by Kai Kara-France. I mean, how hard does Kai hit? Then Moreno couldn't drop him. Moreno hit him some big shots. Kai just has different level of power. There was 1 point in the fight where Moreno did throw that Kai combination. Right overhand, switching stances, left overhand after, trying to land as Steve Erceg is moving on an angle. And now Erceg lost to Moreno, so I think Erceg should definitely fight someone on the lower end of the top 10, right? He should not be going up against top 5 guys right now. He's competitive with some of them. He could beat some of them, I believe, but he needs to get some wins. And it's crazy because he hasn't even been in the UFC for 2 years. He made his UFC debut in July of 2023, and he's already fought the champion, the #1 contender, and now the current title challenger. It's insane. They're moving him way too quickly, right? Because there is a process of evolution for these fighters, and if they just keep fighting the best in the world and losing, sometimes it puts a halt to that evolution. But the hands from both these guys were great. Steve Erceg, I think, was a lot more technical when he was throwing, because he didn't throw as much as he should, I thought. Every time he was throwing, it just looked crisp, technical, and he was landing some precise shots. He had a good right uppercut, jab, right straight, the 1-2-3 combo, which usually hit the guard, and is very effective when he is throwing more. But it was interesting because Moreno wasn't fighting off his jab. We saw that when he fought Royval. I think it might be because he's fighting taller opponents, so he resorts to loading up on his shots to land the overhand specifically. He did that both against Royval and Erceg. It didn't work as much against Royval, but it definitely worked against Erceg. He was landing that right overhand that entire 1st round. Erceg was trying to counter with the left hook, which is a habit a lot of fighters have. When they see the right hand from the same stance opponent, they're going to lean back and counter with the left hook, but they're opening up the center for that right hand to land. And after it lands, Moreno's moving his head to dodge the left hook. But as the fight was continuing, Erceg had amazing footwork, great head movement, slipping so many of the punches that seemingly looked like they were landing. But a lot of those shots were not landing clean, rolling with some of the punches, just moving his head sometimes with the punch. Like Anderson Silva, slipping shots, landing counter punches. Some of his right hand counters on the back foot were so sharp, and Moreno just kept loading up on punches. And the left kicks from Moreno were excellent. To the body, to the leg, mixing up the targets. And he has like a really big step before he throws it, which is how you throw elite switch kick. But he really exaggerates that step, and I think because of how big the step is, the opponent thinks it's going to be another attack when it's still the same switch kick, but he lands that so often. He beat Kai Kara-France with that kick, one of his best techniques in his entire arsenal, but it was definitely a win for Brandon Moreno. But do you give him a title shot? Here he lost Alexander Pantoja 3 times. One of them was in the Ultimate Fighter, but who else would fight the champion? Manuel kept. He hasn't really beaten anybody top ranked. Brandon Royval already fought Pantoja, and Kai Kara-France is going to fight Pantoja soon. You just give it to Moreno again? It's very similar to the whole Adesanya-Whitaker thing, where both of them were beating everybody in the rankings. But Royval did beat Moreno, so it really makes it confusing. Pantoja beating all these guys, it's making it harder for him to get an interesting challenger, because if he beats Kai Kara-France, that's 2 wins against him too. He's beating these guys multiple times. I mean, at some point, he has to go down as one of the greatest in the sport if he continues that. So I don't know what you do with Moreno. I think you give him either Manuel Cap or another rematch with Royval. He already beat Amir Albazi. Tatsuo is coming off a loss. He's not going to fight Alex Perez or Asu Almobayev or Sergey Lombokov. Like, these guys are way too low in the rankings. It has to be either Cap or Royval. Would you guys give him Royval again, do the 3rd fight, because they are 1-1 with each other? Or do you give him Cap, make that a #1 contender fight? Or do you just give him the title shot after Kai Kara-France? I'd like to see the trilogy with Royval, and then have like Manuel Cap versus Amir Albazi or something, who is #3 in the rankings. And then for Steve Erceg, I think he should fight Asu Almobayev. Asu Almobayev is 1 ranked below him. I think it's a good matchup for him. And then we go to the co-main event. Manuel Torres TKO's Dober in the 1st round, late stoppage. It was the common 1-2 combination, open stance, stepping on the outside with the right straight, drops Dober with it, and just lays the hammer for some Dober. It was like over 10 shots, unanswered, and Dober was clearly done. The referee should have stopped that fight way sooner than he did. But also the way he threw the right straight was differently than the first time, because once he overextended, shifted his stance forward, but then the second time he threw it, he didn't move in with the punch. He stayed in position and fired it out precisely. Dober was confused after, he didn't understand how he was finished, but then after seeing the replay, it looked like he wasn't arguing with the loss. So very good win for Manuel Torres. comparison, seeing Ignacio Bahamondes in the top 15 is great for him, right? Because Bahamondes has proven to be a very good fighter. It might even rise in the rankings from there, which leaves a lot of room for Torres too. So I think you give Torres maybe, do you give him a top 15 opponent? Like the loser of Benoit Saint Denis and Will Alvarez? Bro, is speaking Spanish about to be the new meta for the lightweight division? Ignacio Bahamondes, Yoel Alvarez, and potentially Ilia Topuria are 4 fighters that might actually make it big in the lightweight division. But great win for Torres. And then we go to Edgar Chairez, finishing CJ Vergara by his submission, rear naked choke in the first round. It almost looked like the whole Nate Diaz and Leon Edwards 5th round. So Chairez lands a long left hook, palm down too, so he was connecting with the first 2 knuckles, blasted that right through Vergara's chin, rocked him, and then he started taunting. I'm like, no, he's doing the Nate Diaz. He's letting the finish go, and he finished it. Vergara seemed like he was recovering, or at least trying to. Chairez is cutting off the cage, landed a right hand against the fence, which hurt Vergara again. And the way he got the rear naked choke, it wasn't like a conventional setup for a rear naked choke. He went for the neck first, then threw in the hooks. It almost looked like he was just bowling Vergara, cinched in the submission, which was one of the best performances of his career. Amazing win for Edgar Chairez, man. Both of his wins in the UFC have been by submission. Chairez's post-fight interview was pretty sad. So apparently his grandpa sold his truck in order to pay for a surgery for Chairez a year ago. And now Chairez says that his grandpa was watching his fight from heaven. And I'm sure he made him proud, man. Great performance, great fight for him. And the UFC needs to pay these fighters more, man. And then we go to Raul Rosas Jr. versus Vince Morales, where Raul won by a decision. He was the better grappler overall, but Morales kept going for the Peruvian necktie. He was trying to get the Darce choke. The submissions kept ending up on his back. He wasn't able to get the position that he wanted, so it wasn't crushing Raul's shoulder into his artery. So those were uncomfortable submissions, but Raul was able to stay conscious because the submission wasn't all the way in. He had the choke, but he needed the body position. And Raul did a very good job of defending that. He landed some good punches in the stand-up, had very good wrestling, and even when he was slightly getting out of position, he was able to adjust, repositioning himself to be more balanced on top. So very good top pressure, and overall just a solid win. Then we go to David Martinez. Backstep, right hand counter, finishes Saimon Oliveira in the first round. And it was off of the hand trap too. So Oliveira had his left hand open, as his lead hand is occupied. This is something Conor McGregor used to do against many of the orthodox fighters. Force out their power hand, slit the punch, and counter with his own power shot. Martinez lands the punch on the jaw, knee up the center, and finishes the fight on the ground. Then Kevin Borjas defeats Ronaldo Rodriguez by a decision. You know, they only scored 1 knockdown for Borjas, even though he did drop him twice in the first round. It was just that right straight. Borjas drops Rodriguez with the first one, as Rodriguez was throwing the left hook. The same kind of thing we've seen throughout the card. Straight punches beat looping punches, but Rodriguez flips back up to his feet. And then later Borjas drops him again with the same straight right. And the thing is, Rodriguez was loading up on his shots without really setting them up that well. It wasn't the same thing as Brandon Moreno, because both guys were loading up on their punches, but the difference was timing. Moreno wasn't just throwing punches at range without measuring for it first. Rodriguez just throwing strikes out there. Hooks, switch kicks up high, spinning attacks. And Borjas was just moving away, firing out straight punches, and winning the fight off of that. There would be moments like in the second round where Rodriguez wings a hook, and Borjas just backsteps for a right hand, very similar to what David Martinez did. But good upset win for Kevin Borjas. And then we go to Ateba Gautier, absolutely destroying Jose Medina in the first round. Middleweight now has its Francis Ngannou. This guy is so powerful. Although Jose Medina is not that great, he came to the UFC after getting dominated in the Contender Series, which didn't really make any sense, but Gautier was going to absolutely destroy Medina no matter what. But the thing is, Gautier is not wild. He doesn't just throw punches for no reason. It doesn't seem like he relies on his power either, at least from this fight. Just measuring off of his jab, had decent footwork, moving in and out, trying to line up the right hand. He strikes very well and has natural power behind everything. He's also enormous for the weight class, 6'4" at middleweight with an 81-inch reach, and the way he knocked out Medina was all based off technique. Jose Medina took so many shots to the face, and he started laughing and taunting and stuff, just to get finished like 5 seconds after. Gautier was landing good technical punches, stepped away slightly, and then landed the knee up the center, finishing off the fight. A lot of powerful fighters who like to rely on their power would not be trying to keep their hands up, shoulders up, or even focus on defense at all while they have their opponent up against the fence like that. A lot of times those kind of fighters would just be swinging for the knockout. Gautier didn't do that. He tried to focus on his technique. Now it's too soon to say if he's ever going to go far in middleweight because his opponent was Jose Medina, but if he has good takedown defense, he might get some crazy knockouts in the UFC. Then we go to Mel Costa, defeating Christian Rodriguez by a decision. How did Rodriguez lose this fight? He really gets a buff when he fights undefeated fighters, but he had some really good trips in the clinch against Costa, but when the fight went to the ground, he wasn't able to keep good top control until like the last takedown of the fight. He had success in the striking. He was landing good right hands, some good elbows, but Costa was slick on the ground, man, working for an armbar to push Rodriguez away when he was on his back. He went for a Kimura at one point, and Rodriguez tried to get full mount after it, but Costa was able to get him off balance and reversed the position as Rodriguez overthrew an elbow. I think Rodriguez had the skills to win, but he just didn't fight by the best game plan. Like, the trips are great, but maybe not follow him to the ground as much. Costa was very good on the ground for like most of the first round. The fight was in the clinch up against the fence. Rodriguez didn't find the success in the striking because he didn't really try to, you know? But in the third round specifically, he was landing some decent shots, and I think the focus on the grappling kind of lost him the fight. Then Loopy Godinez defeats Julia Polastri by a decision. Had good wrestling throughout the fight, grabbed a kick in the first round and slammed her. Some good strong takedowns, and then in the third round, they were exchanging a lot. Polastri was Terminator walking, pressuring Godinez to the fence and just throwing punches with her hands down and landing some powerful shots too, but overall Godinez's wrestling and some of the punches that she was able to land in the third round won her the fight. The Rafa Garcia defeated Vinc Pichel by decision. This was the lackluster fight of the card. Garcia was pressuring the fight for the most part, throwing some good hooks and haymakers, got a few takedowns. Vinc was laying some good left straights and inside leg kicks, and there were some eye pokes from Vinc Pichel. Not only one of them that the referee separated them, but there was another one in the third round as well. But for the most part, Vinc was pot-shotting, landing singularly, then moving around, whereas Garcia was trying to get in close and just throw his hooks, land to the body, land to the head, and Garcia had really good takedown defense in the fight. Like, he was shoving Vinc off of his legs very easily. So good win for Rafa Garcia. Then Jamall Emmers knocks out Gabriel Moreno in the first round. Moreno took him down and was trying to get the arm triangle, but from the bottom position, he didn't have the best angle either. But they were in that submission for a while, and as soon as they got out to the feet, Emmers started throwing his hands. It was a clear difference of striking ability. You were able to see it right away. Moreno was lacking head movement, and his head was up tall almost the entire time. So Emmers was able to drop him with the left hook setup, landing the right straight behind it. Fighters who don't have the best head movement, they tend to move away in a straight line from the straight right. When you usually want to get off the center, or if you have good distance management, stay just on the outside of the punch so that it overextends, falls short, and you can counter over it. And the damage for the shots were just accumulating for Jamall Emmers. Eventually in the clinch, lands a knee to the body, short right hand, drops Moreno, and finishes the fight with ground and pound. But that was the fight where Emmers' coaches looked like they were about to throw down in the corner, man. It was crazy. I don't know why. Like, their fighter won. You got a first round finish. Amazing win for Jamall Emmers. As we finally go to Markel Medeiros, defeating Austin Hubbard by a decision. This fight was alright. Medeiros was dynamic with the strikes, and Austin Hubbard was a more well-rounded fighter. He wrestled more, threw some punches himself, but seemed to be behind in the striking. For a while in the second round, though, he almost had a rear naked choke, and he got that position without even getting the fight to the ground itself. So it was like, it wasn't exactly like how Charles got Dustin Poirier's back, but neither of them needed to get the fight to the ground first in order to get the back. And I think that might be one of the techniques that evolve in the sport, where fighters are shooting takedowns, but not to get the fight to the ground, but to rotate to the back. And in the third round, Austin Hubbard was able to get the fight to the ground, but the way that Medeiros won that third round was off of the elbows. So he caused a cut on the side of the head of Austin Hubbard with just a few elbows. And according to the scoring, if there is a laceration, that is going to be big for effective striking. So it was a close fight. It was 1-1 going into the third. Austin Hubbard was winning the third round until the elbows. That's why landing damage is so important, not just controlling the fighter on the ground. So decent win for Medeiros. And that was the UFC Mexico card. So I do think it was like a 7 out of 10. It's a good card. Some very good performances, some decent fights. The main event was very technical, and I think it beat expectations. Just the name value didn't seem great, and with Joe Pyfer pulling out, I mean, the Calvin Gastelum fight would have been very good. One of the best fights on the card, but it's still delivered. So I hope you guys enjoyed the fights. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.